Happy post-Thanksgiving, guys. Hopefully you have all recovered from your eating and your turkey. This week we are doing the Industrial Revolution. This is the most important event in American and world history. This is a world-changing event, and even though it started in Britain, it is going to really take off in the United States. And I get to play with trains today, and I'm talking to you about the importance of railroads. All right. All right. So a couple things, first of all, about railroads, guys. It's hard to, today, some people might take the train, some of your parents might take the train to work, but we don't really travel by train anymore. But you have to understand, in an era in which horses were the fastest form of transportation, trains completely and fundamentally changed the world. It had the same impact on the 19th century that cars will have on the 20th century, and even planes for that matter, into the 21st century. Um, and so it's incredibly important in understanding how important railroads were to the entire process of industrialization. As you can see from this chart, and this is a great chart that you could see at some point, the number of miles of railroads built after the Civil War is massive, okay? And you can see kind of a double dip there. There was a panic in 1873 due to overbuilding the railroads. There was another much more severe panic in 1893, once again, due to an overbuilding of railroads. This is going to be a pattern in American economic history. This is the sine curve of the boom and bust cycle. It really started all the way back in 1819, but industrialization and specifically railroads are going to start us on a path of this boom and bust cycle. Everything that we have today in business is because of the railroads. All right. So, number one, they're the first major big business. Because of them, other major businesses grow. For example, the steel industry and the glass industry. Etc. And the oil industry couldn't have happened without the transportation provided by the railroads. And they gave us basically the modern business for the creation of trusts. And trusts, even though trusts are no longer legal, they formed boards of directors, which formed stock. And this led to the way corporations are formulated even into today in the 21st century. Railroads were not necessarily created by any one person. However, numerous people made a fortune. Cornelius Vanderbilt was the basic example of this by basically consolidating the railroad business and standardizing it. The railroads also changed the way we do time in the United States. They created time zones. They created time zones almost 50 years before the United States government recognized them during World War I. And obviously, we still use time zones today. So first, the Eastern trunk lines. Okay, these are mostly trains that were built before the Civil War, although they were dramatically added onto after the Civil War. This basically ultimately connects Chicago and New York and other ports with Chicago. This is also going to make Chicago, from the great state of Illinois, one of the most important train terminuses in the entire country. In fact, the most important, because now the Western railroads are also going to leave from Chicago. Vanderbilt did not build all the lines, but he made his money in steamboats, and he moved that over, and he basically bought up all of the railroads, consolidated them, standardized them, and became fabulously wealthy, as you can see from the picture of his Biltmore estate, which is just fabulous and gorgeous. So, all right, after the Civil War, okay, the catalyst for the Industrial Revolution, all right, and again, railroads are the catalyst for the Industrial Revolution along with the Civil War itself, which led to the importance of the railroads. The federal government decided to take a chance. They gave 170 million acres of public land. This is almost 3 times more than they gave away in the Homestead Act, which encouraged settlers. You can see the checkerboard pattern. They gave every other square mile to the railroads. This gave the railroads tremendous power to sell land. They were supposed to take this money and put it back into the railroads, but the railroads could also have a lot of power by this land in other ways. Number one, they could determine where the railroad track went, and they could make or break where a town went. This is the largest land giveaway in the history of the United States government. And think about this when you think of the arguments on laissez Fair, which one of the other teachers will talk about. Okay, this land grant of railroads went all the way from Chicago all the way out to it was actually mostly Nebraska, all the way out to California. All right, it was a massive land grant. This ended up in the completion of the first transcontinental railroad. It was actually being worked on while the Civil War was going on, so that tells you that the North was pretty confident that they were going to win the Civil War. From the east to the west, it was mainly built by the Union Pacific and Irish immigrants and Irish workers. After they had built the I&M Canal in Chicago, the Irish went out and built the railroad. From San Francisco, building east was the Central Pacific, which was built by mainly Chinese immigrants, among others. The Chinese were the only ones who knew how to use dynamite, and so it was important for them to blast through the Sierra Nevada mountains. And they met just north of Salt Lake City in 1869, about 4 years after the Civil War, and that was the completion of the first transcontinental railroad. As you can see from the map, 3 more will quickly be built over the next 10 years. However, what's important about this is now you can travel from New York City to San Francisco in about 6 days. That is absolutely unheard of. When you shrink the world like that, you're going to completely fundamentally change how business is done. This means that now people can be consumers, but this also means that the railroads have tremendous power because they control transportation, and transportation is critical to industrialization. And the railroads knew this, and the people who made their money from the railroads, like Vanderbilt, formed local monopolies. They were not monopolies over the entire railroad system, but they would form regional monopolies. They were the first, as I said, to develop a trust, which will be used by every other industry in the late 19th century in order to basically dominate their various businesses. And most importantly, they formed pools, which was basically artificially setting prices high. They would agree not to try to outcompete each other, and they would set their prices at an artificially high level so that they would make money. The group that most will be impacted by this is going to be farmers. And you will see in a couple of weeks that the farmers are going to react very badly to the railroads. They are not fond of the railroads because they are stuck with the railroads transporting their crops to markets. In addition, they would give rebates or breaks to big business like Standard Oil and to U.S. Steel. And so they gave big breaks to big business, whereas people like farmers did not make out with the railroads. Many of these things will be considered to be illegal, but for about a 30-year period, the railroads had a grasp on the entire country, as you can see from the cartoon. The woman representing the Republic, and you can see even the Congress building is wrapped by the python that is the railroads. And finally, this is a great cartoon if you ever get to see it. This is a take on the Colossus of Rhodes. That is Vanderbilt, and he is the modern Colossus of railroads, if you get it. So, and look at the importance of the railroads. Vanderbilt made his money in steam shipping. However, he used that money to consolidate the railroads. Carnegie made his money in railroads and then moved into the steel industry. And J.P. Morgan made his money in banking, but then he consolidated. He did the second consolidation of railroads after 1873 in the panic. So all of these other people who made money in other businesses turned to the railroads at one point or another in their careers. Again, railroads incredibly important to the industrialization of the United States. All right, thanks guys. Hope you enjoyed it.